By morning, the house smelled like burnt coffee and regret, and my sister still hadn't gone home. That's the part one keeps circling back to. Not the way the night began or the things that were said in low voices after midnight, but the fact that sunlight came through the blinds and she was still there, still asleep on the couch, still wrapped in the same blanket my wife had pulled from the hall closet hours earlier, like this had all been planned. It hadn't. At 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I remember the time because I just checked it, annoyed that sleep wasn't coming. My wife was already in bed beside me, facing the wall, pretending to be asleep. We'd had one of those quiet arguments earlier, the kind that doesn't raise voices, but leaves everything sharp. The message was from my sister. Can I come over? I don't want to be alone tonight. No explanation, no emojis, just that. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My sister didn't do vague. She over-explained everything. If she was asking like this, something was wrong. I slid out of bed and stepped into the hallway to call her back. She answered on the first ring. Her voice was steady. Too steady, which scared me more than if she'd been crying. I'm outside, she said. I didn't want to ask unless I knew I could. I looked at the front door, then back toward the bedroom. The light under the door was off. My wife hadn't moved. Okay, I said. Come in. When I opened the door, my sister stood there with nothing but her keys in her hand. No bag, no jacket, even though it was cold. Her eyes were red, but her face was composed, like she decided not to fall apart until later. She stepped inside and hugged me without asking. Held on longer than usual. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. My wife appeared at the end of the hallway then, barefoot, hair pulled back, wrapped in silence. She didn't ask questions, just nodded once and said, Do you want tea? That should have been my first warning. My wife doesn't offer tea when she's calm. She offers it when she's bracing herself. We sat in the living room with 3 mugs on the coffee table, steam rose and vanished. My sister talked in fragments about a fight she didn't want to explain yet, about feeling stupid for trusting someone, about how the apartment felt too quiet when she walked back into it alone. No names, no details, just wait. My wife listened with her legs tucked under her, fingers wrapped tightly around her mug. Every so often, she glanced at me like she was checking whether I was hearing the same thing she was, whether I felt the shift happening. Around 1:30, my sister's voice slowed. Her words started looping. She apologized twice. For coming over so late. I told her it was fine. My wife said, You can stay. It's late. That should have been the end of it. Guest room, lights out, normal boundaries restored in the morning. Instead, my sister shook her head. I don't want to be alone in a room right now. Silence followed. Thick, uncomfortable. My wife stood up, walked to the hall closet, and brought back a blanket. She handed it to my sister, then looked at me. She can sleep here, she said, on the couch. My sister laid down, curled on her, sighed, exhausted in a way that went deeper than sleep. Within minutes, her breathing evened out. My wife didn't move right away. She stayed standing, staring down at her. She's always been able to do that, she said quietly. Fall apart and still look put together. I didn't answer. Eventually, we went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the faint sounds from the living room, the shift of fabric, a sigh, the house settling around the 3 of us. At some point near dawn, I realized something had changed. Not exploded, not broken. Shifted. Because this wasn't just my sister crashing on the couch. It was the beginning of something none of us had named yet. Something that didn't belong neatly to family or marriage or the rules we thought we understood. And when the sun came up and she was still there, I knew the night hadn't ended when we went to bed. It had only paused. I woke up to the sound of cabinets opening and closing too carefully. That deliberate quiet people use when they don't want to be noticed. For a moment, I forgot everything. Then memory rushed back. The message, the door, the couch, the way my wife had looked at my sister like she was trying to read a future she didn't want to see. I checked the time, 6:18 a.m. My wife wasn't in bed. I learned later that she'd been awake since 5, that she'd stood in the kitchen for a long time before making coffee, staring out the window like she was waiting for someone to knock, even though no one ever does at that hour. When I stepped into the living room, my sister was sitting upright on the couch, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. She hadn't gone home. She hadn't even changed positions like she'd slept lightly, afraid to fully rest. My wife stood at the counter, mug in hand. She didn't turn around when she spoke. "Morning," she said. Neutral, careful. My sister looked up at me, eyes clearer than the night before, but heavier somehow. "I didn't mean to stay this long," she said quickly. "I can leave if no," my wife interrupted, turning now. "It's fine, really." The word really landed wrong, too firm. Like she was trying to convince herself. We sat at the table. Together, 3 chairs pulled in close. The coffee was strong and bitter. No one commented on it. My sister picked at a piece of toast without eating it. My wife washed her hands, not her face. At 7:02 a.m., my wife asked, "Do you want to talk about what happened?" My sister froze. There it was. The question that had been waiting all night. She shook her head once. "Not yet." Another pause. This one's sharper. "I don't mean to pry," my wife said too quickly. "I just don't want you thinking you have to protect us from the truth. Us." That word stayed with me. My sister nodded, but her eyes flicked toward me instead of my wife. I felt something twist in my chest, a reflex I didn't ask for. "I just needed to feel safe," she said, "and I didn't trust myself to be alone." My wife inhaled slowly, then she surprised both of us. "You can stay another night," she said. "If you need." I looked at her. My sister looked at her. "You don't have to," my sister said. "I don't want to be in the way." "You're not," my wife replied. "Your family." But the way she said it sounded like a test. The day unfolded strangely after that. No one left. No one suggested plans. We existed in the same space, orbiting one another. My wife worked remotely from the dining table. My sister stayed on the couch, scrolling, occasionally staring into nothing. I moved between rooms, pretending to be productive. Every so often, I caught them watching each other when they thought I wasn't looking. Not hostility, something else. Measuring. By late afternoon, the air felt thick, like a storm that refuses to break. At 4:37 p.m., my sister finally spoke. "It was someone I shouldn't have trusted," she said, staring at the floor. "I knew better. I just didn't want to listen to myself." My wife closed her laptop slowly, fully. "Did he hurt you?" she asked. "No," my sister said. Then after a second, "Not like that." Another loaded pause. "I don't want to be dramatic," my sister added. I don't know who I am to people anymore." I saw my wife soften then. Really soften. She moved to the couch and sat beside her, not touching, but close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. "That feeling doesn't mean you're broken," my wife said. "It just means something finally cracked." I watched them from the doorway. 2 women I loved in entirely different ways. Suddenly closer than I'd ever seen them. It should have reassured me. Instead, it made me uneasy. That night, we ordered takeout, ate from containers, laughed once or twice, the sound strange. My wife nodded. Yes. I didn't speak. I didn't know how to. When the lights went out later, I lay awake listening to the same sounds as the night before. Only this time, I knew everyone else was awake too. At 12:03 a.m., my sister whispered from the living room. "Are you up?" I was. My wife was too. I could feel it in the stillness beside me. "Yes," I said quietly. There was a pause. Then, "I don't want to be alone out here." I sat up. Before I could answer, my wife spoke into the comfort anymore. It was about boundaries being redrawn without anyone admitting it yet. And once that happens, there's no clean way back. No one talks about how loud silence gets when 3 people are pretending not to feel the same tension. My sister sat on the edge of the bed like she didn't belong there. My wife lay flat on her back, hands folded over her stomach, eyes open. I stayed upright against the headboard, every muscle tight, aware of where everyone was without needing to look. Minutes passed, maybe longer. My sister was the first to move. She shifted her weight, exhaled shakily, then spoke into the dark. "I feel stupid," she said, "for needing this much." My wife turned her head slightly, not toward me, toward her. "Needing people isn't stupid," she said, "pretending you don't need them." Is another pause? "I hate that I came here," my sister admitted. "And I hate that I didn't know where else to go." "You came because you trusted us," my wife replied. "That counts for something." I wanted to interrupt to ground the conversation to remind everyone who we were supposed to be to each other. I didn't. My sister's voice wavered. I keep thinking if I'd made different choices, I wouldn't be here sitting between you two like this. That did it. My wife sat up. You're not between us, she said gently but firmly. You're with us. The word landed heavy in the room. I felt my chest tighten. I should have said something then, anything, but the truth was part of me felt relief. Relief that someone else was naming what I'd been circling all day. My sister turned toward her. Doesn't this bother you? Yes, my wife said immediately. Then after a breath, but not for the reasons you think, I finally looked at her. She met my eyes, held them. I don't like secrets, she continued. And I don't like pretending something isn't happening when it is. My sister swallowed. And what do you think is happening? My wife didn't answer right away. She glanced at the door like she was checking whether there was still time to walk out of the room and reset everything. Then she said, I think all three of us are afraid to admit that this stopped being temporary the moment you stayed the night. The room went still. My sister's hands clenched in her lap. I never meant to cause problems. I know, my wife said. That's part of what makes this harder. I stared at the wall, my thoughts racing. I felt like a witness to something fragile being placed on the table between us, something that could either be examined carefully or dropped. I don't want to take anything from you, my sister said quietly. I just don't want to feel invisible right now. My wife surprised me again. She reached out and took my sister's hand. You're not invisible, she said. Not here. The gesture was simple, comforting, but it sent a shock through me all the same. Because suddenly this wasn't just my sister needing support. It was my wife choosing to give it in a way that pulled all of us into the same space. I don't know what this means, my sister whispered. My wife squeezed her hand once. Neither do I finally spoke. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Then maybe we don't define it tonight. Both of them looked at me. We don't make promises or decisions. I continued. We just acknowledge that something's off. And we don't lie about it. My wife studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. That's fair, she said. My sister let out a breath she'd been holding. I can do that. Slowly, my wife lay back down, not turning away this time. My sister shifted closer, not touching but no longer perched like a guest. No one crossed a line, but something fundamental had already changed. In the quiet that followed, I realized the danger wasn't what might happen next. It was how natural this already felt, and that scared me more than anything else. The morning after that night felt dishonest. Not because anything happened. It hadn't, but because everything had almost happened and the world outside our windows had no idea. Sunlight filled the bedroom like it always did. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Normal sounds doing their best to convince us we were still living a normal version of our lives. My sister was gone when I woke up. No note, no text, just the blanket folded on the couch like she'd been trying to erase herself from the space she'd occupied. My wife was already up, standing at the sink, staring at nothing. She left early, she said without turning around. Sighed she didn't want to make things harder. Harder than what? I almost asked.